The Sabbath, the weekly day of rest, is a uniquely Jewish concept in origin. It's the fourth of the 10 Commandments, the only Jewish holy day to be so ordained. The Sabbath is derived from the belief in the divine creation of the world. That in 6 days God created the heaven and the earth, all that grew and moved. But on the 7th day, God ceased labor. In the days following the Exodus from Egypt, from years of bondage and slavery, the Sabbath day came to represent, in addition, social justice. It's a day of rest from labor for all, irrespective of position or social standing. Slavery is oppression. The Sabbath signifies freedom. The book of Deuteronomy records, "Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." According to the Bible, when the Israelites arrived in the Sinai desert, God provided them with manna that could be cooked and eaten like bread. Every day the Israelites gathered manna, but on the 6th day they were commanded to gather twice the amount, enough for the 6th and for the 7th, so that the 7th day would be a Sabbath for the Lord and a day of rest. Jewish law cites 39 categories of labor which are expressly forbidden on the Sabbath. They are the very tasks which were employed in the building and maintaining of the tabernacle for the Ark of the Covenant during the Israelites' sojourn in the desert. Acts which demonstrate man's creative power, such as growing and preparing food, spinning, weaving, working with leather, writing, building, kindling or extinguishing fire. At the same time, no Sabbath prohibition must ever stand in the way of saving a human life. In modern times, strict Jewish law would consider the switching on or off of an electric appliance, driving a motor vehicle, or turning on a TV set to be contravening the laws of the Sabbath day, for they are acts which are linked back to the Sabbath prohibitions of ancient times. But technological devices such as timers for the automatic operating of electric lights are permitted under Jewish law, providing they are set prior to the entrance of the Sabbath. In Judaism, the day begins from the preceding evening. So the Sabbath day commences on Friday just before sunset and lasts until Saturday night. All preparations for the day are completed prior to Sabbath Eve. It's normally the task of the mother of the home to light 2 candles just before the entry of the Sabbath.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. אמן. שבת שלום.
Upon the table, 2 loaves of bread symbolize the 2 portions of manna which were provided for the Sabbath. A goblet for wine is placed upon the table for the Sabbath benediction, the Kiddush. In many communities, on Sabbath Eve, the parents of the home perform a traditional blessing over their children. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his face upon you and give you peace. The Kiddush recalls how God created the heaven and the earth in 6 days. But on the 7th day, he rested and made it holy. A blessing is made over the wine, the symbol of Sabbath joy. The Kiddush continues in celebration of the Sabbath as a unique gift, a heritage from God's work of creation, and a reminder of the liberation from slavery in Egypt. A blessing is made over the 2 loaves of bread.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם המוציא לחם מן הארץ.
A portion of bread is then handed to each of the celebrants. During the festive meal, traditional Sabbath songs are sung. In Jewish mystical tradition, the Sabbath is considered a bride, and the house of Israel her groom. The peace and serenity of the Sabbath day is rendered in the paintings of Moritz Daniel Oppenheim, a 19th century Jewish-German artist. It is a day which begins with synagogue and is then devoted to religious study, to rest, to family and friends. As the Sabbath draws to a close on Saturday, another ceremony, that of Havdalah, literally separation, marks the conclusion of the Sabbath and the passage back to regular weekday. Havdalah begins at the time by which 3 stars have appeared in the sky. The ceremony commences with a blessing made over a full cup of wine.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא מיני בשמים.
A spice box is passed among the celebrants in order that the sweet fragrance of the Sabbath may pass into the week. A blessing is made over the flame of the multi-wicked Havdalah candle, praising God, the creator of the light of fire. The ceremony of Havdalah signifies the separation of the holy from the profane, of the Sabbath from the everyday. Sabbath prohibitions, such as lighting fire, are now no longer in force. After drinking the wine, the candle is then extinguished. The singing of Shavua Tov, a good week, begins. It's the hope for a peaceful and fruitful week until the next Sabbath.
Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov.
Food is, of course, one of life's basic necessities. But in Judaism, the act of preparing and eating food takes on an additional dimension through the laws of kashrut, the dietary laws, those laws which determine what is kosher and what is not. Practically speaking, a great many foods are kosher. All fruit and vegetables, eggs, milk, cereals and grains, all fish which have both fins and scales, beef, mutton, and all meat products coming from four-footed animals which chew the cud and have parted hooves, such as the cow and the lamb. Poultry like chicken, turkey, goose, and duck. But all kosher animals and poultry must be slaughtered and prepared according to strict Jewish tradition for the meat to be free of blood and kosher. Non-kosher foodstuffs include pork, rabbit, horse meat, any animal which preys upon other animals. Frogs are not kosher, nor are eels, shrimps, or shellfish. In the Bible, the prohibition "you shall not cook the kid of the goat in the milk of its mother" appears 3 times. This verse has been interpreted largely as forbidding the mixing of a life element, milk, with that of a death element, as in the meat of the kid. As a result, Jewish law prohibits the mixing of milk and meat-based foods. Meat or poultry may neither be cooked nor eaten with dairy products. In simple terms, a cheeseburger is not kosher. In the kosher kitchen, milk and meat foodstuffs and dishes are kept separately. Red is often used to denote meat dishes and equipment, while blue signifies dairy. There are 2 sets of dishes, cooking utensils, and cutlery for dairy and meat foods. Glass dishes, providing they are cleaned thoroughly after each meal, may be used for both milk and meat foods. After eating a meat food, it's customary to wait a full 3 or 6 hours before eating a dairy food. After eating a dairy food, a brief period of time is observed before eating a meat food. Any food which is neither milk-based nor meat-based is considered parve, or neutral. Included in this category are foods like eggs, fruit, fish, bread, and vegetables, and these foods may be eaten with either milk or meat products. Strictly observant Jews only drink wine produced and prepared by Jews. In ancient times, other wine was prohibited, since it was used in pagan ritual. Today, many kosher food products and beverages carry a kosher marking, making kosher eating easier today than perhaps at any other time. The basis of the dietary laws is laid down in the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy in the Bible. Over the ages, scholars have tried to reason and explain their origin. Some see the restrictions on certain foods as providing a basis for good health and sound mind. Others claim that the dietary laws have helped define the Jews as a people by setting them apart from others. But all agree that the dietary laws are observed because they are so commanded. They are simply accepted as the law of God. Every year, all over the world, beginning on the 25th day of the Jewish month of Kislev, Jewish families celebrate Hanukkah. It's a festival whose origins go back more than 2,000 years to the days of the Maccabees, their victory over the armies of Greece, and the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. For 8 days, Hanukkah lights are kindled. It's a time for family,
for gift-giving, for remembering the days of old. It is the festival of lights. It is Hanukkah. "22 centuries ago, the Jews of Judea were living freely under Greek rule. Within the Jewish community of that time were farmers, merchants, and traders. The most influential were the scribes and priests of the temple. The Jews were free to practice their religion, and Jewish law was given the status of official law. Nevertheless, some Jews, especially among the wealthier classes, were attracted to the ways of the Greeks and were beginning to assimilate. Then Antiochus Epiphanes became king. He declared that he would unify the different peoples of his empire through the worship of Greek idols and the practice of Greek culture. He was determined to put an end to the state of Jewish autonomy in Judea. He appointed high priests to the temple who were sympathetic to Greek ideas, and through them, a Greek-style community was established in Jerusalem. But Antiochus wanted all of Judea to worship Greek idols, and he passed a series of laws designed to completely erase Jewish life in the region. Jews found practicing their faith were to be tortured and put to death. Altars to Greek gods were to be erected in Jewish villages throughout the country. The temple in Jerusalem would no longer be a temple to the one God, but a temple to Zeus Olympus. While some Jews were ready to accept these measures and adopt the ways of the Greeks, most were not. It was clear that if the Jews wanted to retain their religion and way of life as a people, they would have to fight for their faith or lose everything. The Maccabean revolt began at the village of Modi'in in the Judean hills. Mattathias, a member of the Hasmonean family, was a priest, a landowner, and a leading figure in the village. When Mattathias refused the royal order to sacrifice to Zeus, the king's men came to the village to confront him. Mattathias took up arms, slew an officer and also a Jew who was ready to perform a sacrifice. Then he destroyed the pagan altar and called out, "All those who remain faithful to the Lord, join with me." It was a call for open rebellion. Together with his 5 sons, Mattathias took to the hills. Jews from all over the country joined the revolt. From the mountains, the Maccabeans struck at units of the Greek army. As they passed through Jewish villages, they removed every trace of idol worship. Gradually, the Maccabeans gained ground throughout Judea. After a year of rebellion, Apollonius, the Greek commander of Samaria, set out with a large force to crush the revolt. Leading the Jewish rebels was Judah the Maccabee, son of Mattathias, a daring, bold warrior who relied on speed and surprise for victory. Judah brought his small force to the heights of Labona. In a lightning descent, he routed the Greek forces, and Apollonius himself was slain. A second Greek force set out, but was turned back to the coast at Beit Horon. A year later, an even greater Greek army was assembled to put an end to the Jewish rebellion. But Judah, in a series of brilliant strategies, completely destroyed them. Another Maccabean victory at Beit Tzor left the way open to Jerusalem. Judah entered Jerusalem in triumph at the head of his army. The Maccabeans began to clean and purify their temple. It is said that when the Maccabeans entered the temple area, they discovered that the Greeks had defiled all the oil used for kindling the candelabrum, apart from one small jar, enough to last for 1 day only. Yet, a miracle occurred. The candelabrum burned for 8 days, the time needed to prepare fresh, pure oil. Then, on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, Judah rededicated the temple. It was a time of great joy. 3 long years of war were over, and the celebrations lasted for 8 days. In this way, the first feast of dedication of Hanukkah was celebrated. The laws and traditions surrounding Hanukkah have developed with the years, but it remains a festival celebrating the victory of the Maccabees, the rededication of the temple, and the miracle of the candelabrum which burnt for 8 days. The Hanukkah lamp should be kindled soon after sunset. The lamp should be placed outside the entrance of the home or set on the window nearest to the street so that all may see the celebration of the miracle. Many families light more than one Hanukkah lamp. A shamash, an additional light, is used to actually kindle the Hanukkah lights. On the first night, one light is lit on the right of the Hanukkah lamp. On each successive night, up to the 8th, one light more, beginning each evening with a new light. Before kindling the Hanukkah lights, 2 prayers are recited. The first is a blessing for kindling the lights.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah.
The second blessing is for the miracle.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, she'asa nisim lavoteinu, bayamim ahem, bazman hazeh. Amen. Hanerot halalu anu madlikim.
The song is that of Hanerot Halalu, which explains the significance of the lights of Hanukkah. On the first night only, there is a third blessing for the privilege of having reached this point in our lives, the season of Hanukkah. The kindling is concluded with the song Maoz Tzor, O Fortress, Rock of My Salvation. Hanukkah is also a children's holiday with Hanukkah parties and games. Often children receive Hanukkah coins, spending money for the holiday. Spinning the dreidel, or top, is a popular Hanukkah pastime. Probably because of the miracle of the oil, fried dishes have become traditional foods of the festival. Potato pancakes, latkes, are always eaten at Hanukkah time. Hanukkah has become one of the major events of the Jewish year. Yet while it is a deeply Jewish festival, its meaning has reached out beyond the Jewish world. For while it celebrates the right of the Jews to remain Jews, as in the days of the Maccabees, it has also been interpreted as symbolizing the victory of the few against the many. It is truly a festival of light.
The shofar, the ram's horn, has been sounded throughout Jewish history. It was first heard, according to the Bible, when God called Moses to the summit of Mount Sinai to receive the law. It is said a great shofar will be sounded on the day of Israel's final ingathering. The shofar is also a herald of freedom. In ancient times, it ushered in the year of Jubilee, proclaiming liberty throughout all the land and all the inhabitants thereof, when slaves were set free and property restored to its rightful owners. The shofar is made from the curved horn of a ram or any kosher animal apart from the steer or cow. The horn is softened, hollowed out, smoothed, and molded to the desired shape. In the Bible, the shofar has been blown for a multitude of purposes. It was sounded during coronations, as a call to war, in order to induce fear, and at times of great victory. When Joshua laid siege to Jericho, the walls of the city gave way to the blasts of the shofar. In modern times, the shofar is sounded during the Jewish month of Elul, in the period of repentance leading up to the high holidays of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. On Yom Kippur, the shofar is sounded once only, marking the end of the day-long fast and the conclusion of the period of self-accounting which began in the days preceding Rosh Hashanah. But during the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, it is sounded some 100 times on each day. There are many explanations for the sounding of the shofar at Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. It is a stirring sound which inspires the people to amend their lives. Traditionally, it proclaims the anniversary of the creation of the world and is a reminder of the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. The shofar is linked to the story of the binding of Isaac. When God held back Abraham's hand from sacrificing his son, Abraham substituted a ram, whose horns were caught in a nearby thicket, and this portion of the Bible is read on Rosh Hashanah. The interpretation of the commandment to sound the shofar, as written in the Bible, has resulted in 3 kinds of sound. Tekiyah, a single blast. Shvarim, a sound broken into 3 parts. Teruah, a sound broken into 9 shorter parts. Each time the shofar is sounded, it is blown in different combinations, 3 times each, so as to be certain that the commandment to sound the shofar is correctly observed with the appropriate sound made. The shofar, whose sound has accompanied the Jewish people from the days of the Exodus and up to modern times. The sound which heralded the giving of the law, and it is said will be heard upon the day of redemption.
וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך.
These words appear as a commandment in the last of the 5 books of Moses. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. One of the most popular Jewish observances is that of affixing a Mezuzah to the doorpost of a Jewish home. Inside the Mezuzah case is a rolled parchment upon which are written 2 passages from the Bible, which form part of perhaps the most important Jewish prayer, that of Shema Yisrael. The same passages also appear, together with 2 additional passages, inside the tefillin, worn by Jews upon the hand and the head every weekday for morning prayer. So it has been for thousands of years. The passages from the Bible which are enclosed within the Mezuzah and the tefillin are written, not printed, on parchment. They contain the injunction to bear the words of the law upon the hand, between the eyes, and upon the doorpost of the home, as a sign of being Jewish. The square Hebrew script is the same as that which appears in the scrolls of the law, the Sefer Torah. The writing is carried out by a Torah scribe, who writes each letter with infinite care. The work of the scribe is so exacting that he must not be disturbed even momentarily. On the rear of the Mezuzah scroll, the word Shaddai, literally the Almighty, is written. The word Shaddai is formed out of the Hebrew letters Shin, Dalet, and Yod. These letters are also the capital letters of the Hebrew phrase Shomer Daltot Yisrael, meaning guardian of the doors of Israel. A custom in Jewish life when moving into a new home is to make a Hanukkah Bait, a Jewish housewarming, in which a mezuzah will be affixed to the front doorpost and every other living room in the home. Prior to fixing the mezuzah, a blessing is recited.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu likba mezuzah.
The mezuzah is placed on the right side of the entrance, on the upper third of the door, often with its top inclined towards the house or room. Within the decorative case is the parchment scroll containing the 2 passages from the Bible. The scroll must be checked twice in every 7 years to be sure that it is legible and not damaged. Generations of Jewish families all over the world have continued the tradition of placing a mezuzah on the doorposts of their homes for thousands of years. It has always been the sign of a Jewish home.
Good job, Betty. Good job.
A pair of tefillin can be years in the making. They're built out of leather which must be perfectly cured and shaped into square boxes. The scrolls which are inserted inside the tefillin are of 2 types. The 4 passages of the hand tefillah are written on one piece of parchment and placed within. The same passages for the head tefillah are written on 4 pieces of parchment, each one to be placed in a separate compartment. The single compartment of the hand tefillah and the 4 compartments of the head tefillah, within which the parchment scrolls are placed, are both sealed with a square piece of leather stitched tight. The completed tefillin will have received some 30 coats of black paint. The head tefillah has the letter Shin inscribed on both sides, on the right with the normal 3 strokes, on the left with 4. Finally, straps, also painted black, are connected to the tefillin, enabling them to be worn on the hand and upon the head. From the time a boy reaches bar mitzvah at the age of 13, he is enjoined to put on tefillin for prayer every morning except on Sabbath and the Jewish festivals. The hand tefillah is placed on the upper left arm. The first blessing of laying tefillin is then said.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu l'haniach tefillin.
The strap is tightened and then wound 7 times around the arm between the elbow and the wrist. The head tefillah is now put in place, taking care that it sits squarely on the forehead, the knot resting on the nape of the neck, and the straps hanging down in front. 2 further blessings are then recited.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al mitzvas tefillin. Baruch shem kavod malchuso le'olam va'ed.
Finally, the remaining part of the strap of the hand tefillah is then wrapped around the hand and the middle finger to form the Hebrew letters Shin, Dalet, and Yod, making the word Shaddai. Every morning at prayer, Jews recite the Shema Yisrael, one of the most important Jewish prayers, portions of which appear inside the Mezuzah and the tefillin. It is an affirmation of belief in a single, almighty God, a belief which has distinguished the Jewish people for thousands of years.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you are out walking, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house, and upon your gates.
Mark and Shelley arrived in their new home from across country on a Thursday afternoon. Their furniture had not yet arrived, nor were there provisions in the house. The Sabbath was approaching, and Mark and Shelley, both traditional Jews, were concerned about how they would celebrate the day, far from family and friends. Checking the phone book, they found the number of the local rabbi, who right away invited the young couple for the weekend to celebrate the Sabbath with him and his family. But before Mark and Shelley left for their Sabbath visit, They were delighted to be supplied with temporary furniture and a store of food and provisions. It had all been taken care of by members of the local Jewish community who had acted in a tradition that goes back centuries, a tradition of caring for each other's welfare directly. It is part of the idea of tzedakah, which means in Hebrew at one and the same time righteousness and charity, a concept which is entirely Jewish. The concept of charity as a foundation of Jewish life is first defined in the Bible. Verse after verse emphasizes the value of charity as one of the most positive acts. Judaism recognizes that a person does not choose to be in need, but is often the victim of circumstance, of financial misfortune, or family tragedy. The basis of tzedakah is not philanthropy, it is social justice. In the 12th century, the great teacher and scholar Moses Maimonides wrote, "You are commanded to give the poor man whatever he needs. If he has no clothing, he should be provided with clothes. If he has no house furniture, it should be procured for him. No one ever becomes poor from giving charity." Maimonides listed 8 degrees of charity, each degree on a higher plane than the one before. The lowest is he who gives grudgingly. Then he who gives less than he should, but does so cheerfully. The third degree is he who gives only after having been asked. Then he who gives before being asked. The fifth degree, he who gives in such a way that the donor does not know who the recipient is. Then, he who gives in such a way that the recipient does not know who the donor is. The seventh degree, he who gives in such a way that the donor does not know who the recipient is, nor does the recipient know who the donor is. The highest degree of charity, according to Maimonides, is in alleviating need before it occurs, by offering partnerships, by giving employment. For this degree of charity entails no loss of self-respect. The amount of charity to be given is also carefully defined. To give only 1/20th of one's wealth is considered to be mean. To give 1/5, too large, for it might lead to one's own ruin. But 1/10 is thought to be the correct proportion. The Jewish concern for the poor, the sick, the aged, widowed, and destitute of the community has defined a way of life for centuries. Everyone is expected to give and receive according to his needs, on an individual and organizational basis. Societies for visiting and caring for the sick, for the aged, for looking after the synagogue, for the care of orphans, for the needy, for brides without a dowry, as well as a host of other aid societies, have been operated and funded in Jewish communities all over the world on the basis of charity. In addition, special attention was always given to the needs of those in the land of Israel. The concept of communal self-help and aid continues, but has been superseded by an overall responsibility and concern for Jews in need wherever they may be, in the United States, in the Soviet Union, in Israel, in countries of distress. Organizations like the United Jewish Appeal, Hadassah, and the Joint Distribution Committee in the United States have raised enormous amounts over the years as aid for Jews in need. But the source of this massive philanthropic endeavor, which has no equal, is in the principles of tzedakah laid down by Jewish law and tradition, which considered the giving of charity one of the supreme gifts of man to man. The great Rabbi Akiva was once approached by a man who asked him to explain all Jewish teaching in one line. "Love your fellow man as you would yourself," quoted Akiva from the Bible. That is the entire Torah.